The Ghost of Wall House. No one would stay in the house for long. Renters came and went, some staying only a few days or perhaps a month before moving away again, usually in the dead of night, leaving the doors wide open and most of their possessions behind. When people spoke of the Walls place, the first thing they said was what a beautiful house it was. That is, from the outside. But the words ghost and haunted were mentioned more than once because everyone in Oak Hill knew the story of the man who built the house. Rumored to have no conscience, stealing the plot of land the house was built upon outright from a poor farmer and his wife who had lost everything, including their own son, during the Civil War. William Walls saw an opportunity while having his land surveyed and noticed that the farmer had built his fence, however slightly, across the boundaries of his property. Pulling some strings at the courthouse, Walls laid claim to that beautiful piece of land and kicked the farmer and his wife out. Destitute, the old couple took what little they had and rode away in their rickety cart, pulled by one scraggly mare. Then, Walls shot his own brother to death in a duel over a woman that they both loved, and won her for his own. He built the beautiful house on the corner and brought her to live there with him. Soon there was a son, but the marriage was an unhappy one. More and more, William's horrible temper flared. There were violent outbursts and fits of anger that frightened his new wife so badly that she escaped his clutches with the baby and returned to her mother's. William stayed on in the new house, gambling and drinking with rough company, and one night during a poker game he accused another man of cheating, calling him every foul name in the book until the fight came to blows. William was killed by the man with a poker from his own fireplace, bludgeoned to death, and left to die on the stairs. To this very day, he remains. Old Bill Walls, great-grandson to his vile ancestor, was very familiar with the story and what it was like to live with a ghost. As a child, he'd been frightened half out of his wits by the dark, menacing shadows in the hall and the loud curses that seemed to spring out of the very walls themselves in the dead of night. He was terrified of the heavy footfalls on the stairs and of what he might see next. He vowed, when he was grown, never to live in the house again. And so, when his own sainted mother passed on to heaven, Bill sold everything in the house and he put it up for rent. Charmed by its appearance, a piano teacher from a nearby town agreed to rent the house, discounting the rumor that the house was haunted, moving her fine antiques and grand piano into the place, covering the polished floors with rare Persian rugs, and her formal dining room table with fine china and silver. Her students came, sitting on the bench of the piano, instructed by Madame Silvois in the performance of Bach and Beethoven. But the students didn't stay too long, terrified by the guttural growls and footsteps on the stairs and the slamming doors, most refusing ever to set foot in the place again. Not long after, a new minister at Our Daughter of Mercy Episcopal Church arrived in town, inquiring about the house. Bill Walls agreed to rent it to him, divulging the fact that it was haunted, but the minister gave him his assurances that with diligent prayer and Bible readings, the hauntings would stop in no time. For the first few months, things seemed to be going fine. There were no complaints about a thing from his new renters, and Bill Walls assumed the prayers were working since the family was still there. But then, the children began having nightmares, and the family cat was found hanging in the cellar. And one night, the minister's wife was chased down the stairs by a dark, menacing shadow. But the minister chalked it up to her imagination. One Saturday evening, when the minister was preparing a rather heated sermon on resisting the temptations of the devil, the notes he had written burst into flames atop his desk, and while he was putting them out, perplexed by the spontaneous fire, The desk itself was overturned by some powerful, unseen hand, and the room filled with evil laughter that seemed to come from everywhere. The family left the house that very day, the minister telling Walls they wouldn't stay in that godless place another day for love or money. Again, after a series of several renters come and gone, Bill Walls decided it was time to take action. It was time to get rid of the place. He decided to call a realtor and put it up for sale. The realtor arrived at the house driving a yellow Lincoln Continental, parking it right out front. She was a loud, garish, stoutly built woman wearing an outlandish floral dress, the biggest jewelry and ugliest hat Bill had ever seen. She chatted like a magpie as she followed him up the walkway to the door. "This is such a beautiful place. Is it true what they say that the house is haunted? Well, if it's true, you know we're required to disclose that information to potential buyers." She laughed nervously as she followed him to the door. "But that won't make a dinky-doo difference. This place will sell in a jiffy," she announced as she followed him through the door into the wide, dark hallway, peering up at the imposing staircase drenched in late afternoon sunlight and shadow. Bill turned to her. "Yes, Miss Philbrew, this place is very haunted." She raised an eyebrow at that, clutching her purse a little tighter, and followed him up the staircase. Halfway up, the hall filled with guttural snarls and groans, and the front door behind them slammed shut as if the wind were blowing hard outside. Miss Philbrew paused, clutching the rail, white-knuckled and wild-eyed. Then she let out a gasp as Bill turned. An unseen hand knocked the stupid hat from her head, and Mrs. Philbrew threw her hands into the air and shouted, "I can't stay in this house another moment!" She raced back down the stairs into the hallway, headed for the door at a trot. "So you'll list it?" Bill called after her. "You can find somebody else to do that!" she cried, racing out the door toward her car. As Bill stepped out onto the porch, Miss Philbrew fired that Lincoln up and burned rubber. Undaunted, Bill painted himself a for sale sign and stuck it in the front yard, hoping it would do some good. Within a few days, he received a call from an odd little man who wished to see the house. Desmond LeBeau had recently relocated from New Orleans to Oak Hill, and upon taking the tour, he seemed completely unaffected by the heavy footfalls on the stairs, the sound of the front door slamming, the guttural growls, and the cold chill in the air. "I'll take it," he said to Bill, startling him with his quick response. "You do realize the place is haunted," Bill told Mr. LeBeau. "Oh, yes, I do. You see, that's my life's work, to document ghosts and hauntings, and Buddy, let me tell you, after what I've seen, this place is a walk in the park," he announced, counting out a stack of crisp $100 bills onto the railing of the porch as Bill looked on in astonishment. Shortly after Bill had packed up and left for the sunny shores of Florida, settling into a nice beach condo, he received a call from the constable in Oak Hill rather late one night. The constable apologized for the late hour, but asked Bill if he knew very much at all about Desmond LeBeau, or if he had a next of kin. Bill felt a lump rising in his throat and told the officer he knew very little about the man, only that he'd come from New Orleans and was a ghost hunter. And then the officer gave him the bad news. Mr. LeBeau seems to have been murdered in the house. There were signs of a poker game, liquor and such, and it seems there was a scuffle. Mr. LeBeau was killed by a blow from the fireplace poker to the back of the head, but he was able to crawl as far as the staircase before he died. Bill Walls knew all too well who had done the killing. Back in Oak Hill, the beautiful house on the corner sat empty, the vacant windows watching the street like eyes, and inside, William Walls and Desmond LeBeau are waiting for the next unsuspecting renter to come along.